Hello, this is Lou White. I'm here at Torah Institute. This is the psychedelic shop that produces a lot of the articles. I write the books here, sitting at this very desk. And back here we've got a clock, a DVD copier. This is Phyllis's desk over here. I thought you all would like to know where she sits when you call her and talk to her. And I'm usually sitting here doing something. And I wanted to let you know that we appreciate, your all support and the kindness that you've shown, this work of Yahusha. And we encourage you to use whatever materials we have and share them. Anyway, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the King James Version, and I don't belittle it. I'm not trying to, but I do want you to know more about it that you don't normally hear. Um, anyway, Yahuah had a prophecy where he was going to speak to this people, his people, in a jabbering lip, in a foreign tongue. And what I'd like to do is explain a little of the history of that to you, from Scripture, and what we've seen here. I want to explain something new, too, that some of you may have heard of, but most of you haven't. It's called a black swan event. A black swan event. There's really no swans involved, it's just a term. But it's used to describe an unforeseen event that comes as a major surprise with monumental effects. And this is basically what's happened. Why people call on the Lord, where did that come from? Well, you're about to discover that. Here it is. A black swan event is impossible to predict, but with the benefit of hindsight, it can be identified for what it is. For over 400 years, the King James Version has trained the entire world how to speak the English language, which is that jabbering lip. The prophecy is being fulfilled. Average people are learning that the Hebrew name of our Creator is Yahuah, not G-O-D or L-O-R-D. And furthermore, the evidence of a huge conspiracy to hide the name is being exposed. A lot of people that are entrenched in tradition, they're resisting this, but Yahuah will have his way. Now, the truth of the matter is, the King James Version is actually a translation of the Latin Vulgate. And the Latin Vulgate uses the word Dominus for the name of the Creator. And we'll get into that a little bit. Now, it's an Anglican Catholic translation, actually. I know that people don't think when they're reading their King James that they're reading a Catholic translation. But it has been used to teach the English language to the whole world for over 400 years. Now, it helps to point out that what was withheld from us was the name. They didn't put it in there. They took the Latin Vulgate translation of Dominus and brought it over as the meaning of Lord. That's what Dominus means, Lord. But Yahuah does not mean Lord. The famine of Yahuwah's word is ending as people discover the Hebrew name of our Creator. The name is the key of knowledge, withheld by those who are responsible for teaching the nations the message of deliverance. Now, the prophecy that I'm referring to that's been fulfilled here in the last days is at Yashayahu, that's Isaiah 28:11, that Yahuah will speak to this people through a jabbering lip and a foreign tongue or language. Now, Yahuah allowed the British colonies to flourish around the globe just as the printing press was invented. The printing press was basically invented during the age of colonization. And English colonies were all over the earth. The sun, they say, never set on the English Empire. It was invented to teach the English language throughout the earth, using the King James Version to do so. Foreign students of other countries and cultures learned the English language by reading from the King James Version. Now, this training for 400 years prepared the world so that they would eventually understand the conspiracy to hold back the true name. The famine is over for those who are hungry for the highest of all things. And the highest of all things in Scripture is the name and the word of Yahuah. Psalm 138, verse 2 says the highest of all things is the word and the name. Because, see, the Scriptures are not Christian, they're Hebrew. Now, translators hijacked the name. Now, if you're really wanting to know the truth, the translations have hidden the name from us, as anyone can see just by going and reading the preface of your New International Version. The NIV, they admit that they substituted the name with a device, replacing it with the English word Lord in all capital letters. The English translators developed in several stages through men who were motivated by Yahuah's word to be known by the average people. They wanted you to know the word, but their minds were blinded. In about 1382, an English Catholic priest named John Wycliffe published an English translation of Jerome's Latin Vulgate. Now, this work that he laid down was basically the foundation for all the English translations that followed. Translations of Yahuah's word into any language but Latin was met with extreme prejudice because they would burn you at the stake. The translators and those who helped them were killed, some having their bones exhumed from their graves and burned many years after their deaths. Some people were burned alive for simply teaching their children to recite what is known as the Lord's Prayer in English. For over 1,200 years, Jerome's Latin Vulgate was the only text used by Catholics. Printing it in Latin was the first major project by Gutenberg's movable type printing press. And this was in about the 1450s. It was the very first major project. The Gutenberg Bible became the basis for the English translation known today as the Authorized Version, or the King James Version. The Latin Vulgate used a code known as a Christogram for the name of Yahushua. They printed it IESV. Now the V is actually the Latin letter U, so it was Esu. This was a device used as a substitution for the proper Hebrew name of our deliverer, as it was printed in the King James Version. The Hebrew name Yahushua is not found, and instead the letters IESV were inserted to obscure the true name from the reader. 75 years after the printing of the Latin Vulgate by Gutenberg, William Tyndale published the Nazarene writings from Greek into English. That was about 1526. 10 years later, in 1536, King Henry VIII arrested him and had him strangled and burned at the stake for his English publication, which he smuggled into England from Germany. This was the first major effort to mass produce the scriptures in English. In 1890, that was just a few years before my grandmother was born, James Strong produced a concordance of every word of Scripture based on the King James Version. Each word could be quickly associated with a Hebrew or Greek word as it was translated from. In other words, they skipped over the Latin. It was then possible for anyone without a knowledge of Hebrew or Greek to research the texts word by word. And it ignored the Latin entirely. An average person could now perceive the conspiracy to hide the name of our Creator and break through the language barrier that concealed the true name. The conspiracy to annul the practice of Torah and conceal the name began from the earliest beginnings of Christianity. Constantine called the elders to meet at Nicaea in the year 325 CE to formulate the ground rules. Athanasius, at the age of 27, was invited and represented the views of Alexandria's Didascalia. That's the catechetical school of Alexandria in Egypt. He defined Catholicism as the belief in one God in three persons. That basically mirrored all the pagan pantheons, from Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz through, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva in Hinduism, and all the other cultures. They just reflected a threeness. Now, Arius was, at the time of the Nicene Council, was opposing this. He said, no, that there's one being, and he manifests himself in roles, as it says in Hebrews chapter 1. Arius denied the traditional doctrine of the Trinity, and Constantine imposed the death penalty on all who denied the Trinity doctrine. A belief in the Trinity is central to one's salvation, according to Catholicism. And in 1553, John Calvin burned the theologian Michael Servetus at the stake in Geneva, Switzerland, for his denial of the Trinity. Michael believed that Yahushua is Yahuah in the flesh, and his blood is what bought us, as it says at Acts 20, verse 28. It was his own blood. Now, this is going to be a shock. Was King James a Catholic? Well, let's look at it. He was born into Anglican Catholicism. He was born on the sixth month of the Roman year, on the 19th day, in the year 1566, at Edinburgh Castle. He was baptized on December 17th, 1566, the same year, in a Catholic ceremony at Stirling Castle. He was 6 months old. In other words, he was baptized as a baby. Those who believe his authorized version to be inerrant and superior to all other English versions, they have to admit that it's a Catholic translation. The reason that they think it's inspired is because it was believed for over 1,200 years that the Latin Vulgate that it was translated from is inspired. Now, the King James Version inherited all the errors of the Latin Vulgate, including the word crux. The Greek word staros matches the Hebrew word nas, which is a single upright pole. When Jerome, who is really Eusebius Sophronius, because there's no one really named Jerome, when he translated the Hebrew in the late 4th century into the Latin Vulgate in the late 4th century, he avoided this Latin word staro. Staro is the Latin matching the Greek word staros, and instead inserted the word crux. You can't find crux anywhere in the in the Greek texts at all. It's only in the Latin. So the King James Version brought that Latin error into the King James Version. Today's King James Version uses this Latin source word, crux, the primary symbol of sun worship. First brought into the new faith called Catholicism during the reign of Constantine. Nobody was running around with any crosses, except the pagans, until the time of Constantine, mixing it and blending it together into a syncretism kind of jumbo thing, during the reign of Constantine. The King James Version eliminated the name Yahuah because it followed the Latin Vulgate. It was influenced by the Latin word dominus. In other words, dominus, if you were to read it in Latin, let's say Psalm 23, it would say Dominus Regis Me. In other words, Dominus Regis Me are the first words of Psalm 23. Instead of Yahuah is my shepherd, or Yahuah Roi. Now, Dominus was the title for the sun deity Apollo, who was also Sol Invictus, Mithras. And this deity is pictured on coins minted by Constantine. The Latin Vulgate replaced the name with Dominus 6,823 times. The King James followed this with the English equivalent, the translation Lord. That's why everyone is calling on the Lord. So the name Yahuah was hijacked by the translators. The first translator, of course, was Eusebius, Sophronius, Jerome. Now, Dominus means Lord. It's the English definition for the Hebrew word Baal. The third commandment forbids the destruction of the name. To insert Lord as a proper noun in the place of the name Yahuah, it's blasphemous. IESV is seen in the first printings of the King James Version for the name Yahusha. These are Hebrew words, actually names, that were completely obliterated. Later editions of the King James Version introduced the name Jesus for the first time on this planet. Prior to the 17th century, no one had ever seen or heard the name Jesus. And yet, all Christendom is united under it today. That's because the world was trained with the King James Version in a babbling lip and a foreign tongue. And now the conspiracy is being exposed. Jesus has no meaning in Hebrew, other than if you were to transliterate it, Jesus, it would mean the horse. If a person that was a Hebrew speaker heard the name, it would make no sense. What would you call someone the horse? Anyway, but the true name Yahusha means, well, Yah-U-Sha. There's a suffix, Sha, which is from Yasha, for deliverance. The name Yahuah plus the suffix is literally, I am your deliverer, because Yah means I am. Catholicism is defined basically as a belief system that is predicated upon salvation being that you believe in one God in three persons. That saves you, according to Catholicism. And it just originated, this Trinity thing, it originated in Babylon. And it downloaded into Hinduism's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And it spread into all the world among pagans. Constantine set up the policies of Christianity at the Council of Nicaea, as we said. The term Easter, which is Ostara to witches, was officially recognized and universalized at this same council in the year 325. Constantine ordered that Catholicism would have nothing in common with the hostile rabble of the Yahudim. Passover and other appointed times were prohibited. Our biggest problem is still mixed worship. In other words, we don't do anything, or Christians don't do anything that's written in the scriptures, because they call that legalism if you do anything that it actually says to do. Or they say, that's Jewish, as if they're not supposed to obey. The blending of foreign ideas with the truth is called syncretism. And Constantine, he established his Sunday law for his entire empire in the year 321. That was several years before the Nicene Council. Specifically, it was identified as honoring the sun. That's what he was saying. That's why it's called Sunday. Later, around 365. Constantine died around 330, but around the year 365, at the Council of Laodicea, the weekly Shabbat was outlawed. I mean, they just took the commandment and said, "Uh-uh, that's an offense to us. You're not going to be keeping Shabbat. That's the seventh day." Now, another King James error is we see 28 times the word Pashka as the Greek transliteration of the word Pesach, which is the word Passover. The King James Version is the only translation that ignores the transliterated word Pascha at Acts 12, verse 4, and flips it into a pagan earth mother's name, Easter. That's Ishtar to the Babylonians. And in the book of Acts, Luke refers to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and he uses the word Pesach to apply to the entire period of matzah, which is 7 days without any leavening. But he never used really the word Easter anywhere. He referred to Pesach, matzah with the word Pesach. Pesach doesn't mean Easter. Never did, never will. Now, Easter did not play any part in the true faith until Constantine's time, centuries after Luke wrote his words. Luke would not have used Pesach to refer to a heathen rite like Easter, and yet in the King James Version we see the word Easter at Acts 12:4. Now at Acts 12:4, even the Latin Vulgate transliterates the word Pascha, and yet the tradition of Easter was so ingrained in the Anglican Catholic translators, that's King James, that they use the word Easter even though it wasn't even in the Latin Vulgate. So they opted to alter the meaning of the word. In every other use of the word Pascha, it is translated Passover. All the other translations have corrected this error, but the King James Version defenders still hold on to this blatant mistake, making it appear that the governor intended to release a Yehudi prisoner for his own pagan festival. This makes no sense, and it ignores the Hebrew term, Pesach. Christianity has adopted this word Easter, which is the name for the Babylonian, Earth Mother, Ishtar. Yahushua is our Passover lamb, or Paschal lamb. He's not our Easter lamb. Now, the word that was also ordered to be used in the King James Version by King James was the word church, which is circus or kirk, and it is a word that referred to pagan shrines, as Tyndale used it twice to do so. Now, he was burned at the stake for using the word congregation in place of the word kahal or ecclesia, which is referring to the general people, the believers, the assembly, making no distinction between the laity and the common people and any hierarchy that may have existed. Well, the Catholic organization had a very entrenched hierarchy, and the church represented the term they wanted to use for that authority. But to equate the common people with the authority was absolutely horrible to them, and that's why Henry burned Tyndale at the stake. Now, King James was baptized as a baby in a Catholic ceremony, and he never observed Yahuah's Shabbat, and he and his translators did not ever call upon the name, nor did they ever guard the everlasting covenant. They were Catholic. They just didn't recognize the Pope as the head of the circus. Now, Yahuah's hand was in this still, to prepare the world to receive his true name. even though it's over 400 years later. Those who do not call upon the name, according to Psalm 79, verse 6, are not Yahuwah's people. And those who do not guard Shabbat are not Yahuwah's people either. That's Yeshayahu 56, verse 6. So if you're not calling upon the name and you don't guard his Shabbat, you're not his people. There's no way. But people are turning. This is proof that Christians are not typically practicing the things that Yahuwah's people would do. A Catholic council proclaimed that Christians must not work on the day that Yahuwah ordered no work. Okay? Now this is what the Council of Laodicea says. Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Shabbat, but must work on that day, rather honoring the Lord's day, and if they can, resting then as Christians. But if any shall be found to be Judaizers, let them be anathema from Christ. So they outlawed the seventh day of rest, the one that Yahusha is the master of. He's the master of Shabbat. He said so. And, now we have to choose whether we're going to obey Catholicism or live by every word that proceeds from the mouth of Yahuwah. Matthew 4:4, Yahusha himself said that you have to live by every word that proceeds from the mouth of Yahuwah. Now, Constantine was perpetuating the rebellion of Nimrod and the reign of Babel. But he's going to end all rebellion when he comes back. Now, the restoration of the name is a black swan event, something that's a surprise. It's a big surprise. And the Dead Sea Scrolls are actually there because the name is written on the documents. That's why the scrolls were carefully, as they aged and wore out, they would roll them up, put them in jars, and preserve them in a dry place because the name was written on them and they wouldn't destroy that document. And it was for us in the last days. That's another black swan event. Now, he is speaking to you and me in a jabbering lip and a foreign tongue. He's saying, this is the way. Walk in it. Now, let's look at several translations real quick. Psalm 23, verse 1. In the Hebrew transliteration, it says, Yahuah Roi. Now, that's the meaning of the translation would be, Yahuwah is my shepherd. The King James, which follows the Latin Vulgate, says Dominus regit me, the Latin Vulgate, and they translate it in the King James as the Lord is my shepherd. Dominus regit me transforms into the Lord is my shepherd, because the word Dominus was the word that Eusebius Sophronius chose. It's the Hebrew word that's equivalent to Baal, as I said earlier. Now, obedience is the revolution, and that's so remarkable. The Shabbat is the sign of our rebellion. You can get this article in a printed form at our website at tourism.net, and I hope you enjoyed some of this, and I hope it didn't, disturb you too much. But try to pass this around and see what people think. So, thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you later.